Hello, and welcome to the first vodcast of the Venetian Vase. My name is Steven Powell, and my website is venetianvase.co.uk. I've been um, blogging there about crime fiction and detective fiction and crime films for 14 years now, and this is the first vodcast to go along with it. Hopefully it will be the first of many. I'm going to be talking about Irving Wallace's 1974 bestseller, The Fan Club, in just a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about myself and just give a little bit of a plug for my book, Love Me First in Danger, The Life of James Elroy. James Elroy has been a lifelong obsession for me. I'd written 3 books on him, and then I wrote the first authorized and first full-length biography. It was published by Bloomsbury in February of last year, and only last week I was honoured to discover it was nominated for an Edgar Award for Best Biography. So I'll be seeing you in New York in May for the Edgar Award ceremony. I hope to see lots of people there. And do buy the book. It's very good. I'm rather biased, but even if I do say so myself, it is very good. But enough about me. Uh, it, James Elroy actually recommended the book I'm about to talk about to me, The Fan Club, by Irving Wallace. Wallace was one of a number of writers like Harold Robbins, mid 20th century writers who wrote door stopping, best selling novels that you don't see anymore. But they were melodramas, they were trashy, they were thrillers, they were epics that would take in wars and revolutions and massive love stories. And The Fan Club, despite being a rather epic novel, is actually a very small story, and it's very controversial because the story is kind of heavily sex centered, which was something of a Wallace motif. He'd written the Chapman Report, which was a fictionalization of the Kinsey Report, and he'd written The 7 Minutes, which was about pornography and censorship in post-war US. So The Fan Club is one of those novels that spent over 20 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, but I don't think it would be published today. It is so controversial, the subject matter. I cannot see it being published or being adapted into film. It would be very, very difficult to do, and that's why I've chosen it, because it's problematic and that makes it more discussion worthy. Elroy told me he read it 3 times. He called Irving Wallace Irv the Perv Wallace, and it certainly is a twisted novel. So the plot is this beautiful woman you see on the front cover naked is Sharon Fields. She is the biggest movie star in the world in this fictional world. She is a sex goddess, a bombshell beauty, in the vein of Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor or Sophia Loren. And Adam Malone plays a struggling, down on his luck writer. I've never seen one of them before. But no, seriously. Adam Malone plays a struggling writer who very seldomly got published, has got very little money in the bank, and does kind of menial jobs. He's working in the supermarket when we first see him to get by. But he is a Sharon Fields obsessive. He has this is 1974, so it's all print media, but he's got every tabloid clipping about her that you can imagine. He's got every newspaper spread. His walls are papered with kind of glamour shots of her. He's got every interview. He's seen every film she's done. He knows everything about her, although he knows about her in terms of her public persona, the one that she's projected to the world as a Hollywood starlet turned megastar. So Adam meets 3 other guys and befriends them, and they're all, well, they're Schoenfield's fans. They think she's a very sexy lady, but they're nothing in his league. He is the obsessive. They are a mechanic, Kyle Shively, and 2 other guys who really aren't as important to this plot. One's an insurance salesman, and the other no, sorry, one's an insurance agent and the other is a salesman. But the two main guys of this quartet are Adam Malone, the writer, and Kyle Shively, the mechanic, because Adam is the dreamer and he's the schemer, whereas the mechanic is a Vietnam veteran and he's a blue collar guy. And it's interesting because I think today of these four, the mechanic would probably be the richest because he doesn't have any college debt to pay off. And you know, mechanic's quite a middle class job these days, but he's a blue collar guy and he's angry and he's pissed off and he's bitter because he feels hatred towards women who reject him, even though he's quite promiscuous. So he's, you know, he's a misogynist basically. And he also feels resentment towards anyone who's richer than him, who's more successful than him. No matter how hard they've worked, no matter how hard they deserve it, he feels he's just got this giant chip on his shoulder. So Adam persuades these guys, these three other guys. They bandy together and they form the fan club of the title. He persuades them that Sharon Fields could fall in love with guys like them, and they're like, how? And he shows them newspaper clippings of recent interviews where Sharon Fields says things like, "Oh, I'm sick of dating actors. I'm sick of dating movie stars. What I'm really looking for is a kind of a normal, a real guy, an everyday Joe, a reliable guy." Exactly how these guys see themselves, basically. And they're skeptical at first, but these guys are remarkably self-deluded, and through Malone's kind of mental manipulation, he manages to persuade them that if they were to kidnap Sharon Fields, or in their eyes, just accost her and detain her, it's interesting how they use language to suit their own benefits. Then, over the course of 2 weeks, she would fall in love with them. That they'd have the benefit of passion, of saying that they had a night of passion with Sharon Fields, and one line says, "Would you give anything in the world just for one night of passion with Sharon Fields?" And they set about the task of kidnapping her. So naturally, this all goes horribly wrong. Except at first, this chunky novel of 500 pages, the planning goes smoothly. They all have different skills. The insurance agent looks up her insurance policy, is able to find out the exact details of her wealth, where she spends her money, how she spends it. Carl Shively, the mechanic, is good with disabling the alarms on her Beverly Hills Mansion gate and things like that. So the other character knows a secluded little cabin in the woods where they can take her for this holiday of amore, as they see it. So they get her there, and once she's come to because she's been drugged, she's horrified. She's horrified to see them. She says, "I don't want anything to do with you. You disgust me." And they show the interview where she said, "This is what I'm looking for in a guy," and she's like, "You idiots, you complete and utter idiots. Don't you know all those, that was a puff piece. It was completely written for me. I never said that. And what makes you think, what makes you possibly think that you're those type of guys?" So it does get nasty, and these guys who consider themselves civilized guys, they do resort to rape, and it gets nastier and nastier. And you're probably guessing why this is a controversial text. Now, and why perhaps James Elroy would be so fascinated by it, because it's about weak men, it's about misogynist men, it's about men who feel that they can redeem themselves by the love of a beautiful woman, regardless of whether she loves them or not, that their machismo can be redeemed by her femininity. And it's kind of awkwardly placed in terms of genre types, because it's not quite the rape and revenge genre. I'll put this down for now. It's not quite the rape and revenge genre, which really began or was solidified by I Spit on Your Grave, the film, which came out 3 years after this one. Because rape and revenge genres tend to follow a three act structure, which is the rape, in which case the victim, the woman, is left for dead, or her attackers, her rapists, think she's neutralized. Her return, in which she kind of reformulates herself, gets her dignity back, and then finally her revenge, which is naturally the most satisfying part of it, because the rapists, they suffer extreme pain, castration, punishment, vigilante punishment, which feels apt for their transgressions, for their sins and their heinous crimes. This is more, the fan club is more what Andrew Nettie, the Australian critic, calls logistics porn. In that, to take The Day of the Jackal, the novel, in that it's split into the story of the crime, i.e., the assassin's viewpoint, the jackal, and latterly the story of the investigation, the police investigation, the intelligence service investigation to stop the assassin. And what we enjoy as a reader is the planning on both sides, the meticulous planning of the jackal, and then the unraveling of that plan by the police intelligence services. So the fan club is kind of a logistics porn because you spend a lot of time in these guys' heads, and that's what makes it so problematic. The fan club, you spend the first half of the book almost entirely in these guys' heads. They get humiliated one by one, and you see their problems with women. I mean, Adam Malone, he's a writer. He seems like he's a reasonably social guy. He knows how to talk to people. He's not a hermit, and there are actually women who are interested in him. But he's so deluded. He's only interested in Sharon Fields. You see Shively get stood up by a woman in his own mind, stood up by a woman. The woman actually says quite rightly, "I never had a date with you." And you see the other two guys. One of them's pitching insurance to a wealthy client, and then the wealthy client's teenage daughter comes out and she's a bit of a sex pot, and the guy has to leave. He's just overcome with kind of sexual humiliation. He can't handle it. So you see them get humiliated. You see them get, the misogyny get bashed into them. But interestingly enough, we don't see them at first as kind of rank and file criminals. They've all got middle class jobs. They're all sociable. Some of them are married with children. Um, but as the story wears on, and that's quite a clever ploy by Wallace, because it shows you, I mean, if they were out and out men who've been, abusing women their entire lives, or at least if he was to tell us that from the beginning, there's no way that you could sit through 200 pages of these guys planning this crime. And of course, they don't think of it as a crime. They admit it's kidnapping, but they tell themselves, well, if she comes around to the idea of us afterwards, it's not kidnapping. She can just say she wanted to spend time with us. But they're very self deluded. But over time, as the novel gets darker, as Sharon Fields is detained and raped, these guys get darker, and it turns out that they hadn't been so squeaky clean before that they'd hatched this plan. They'd been adulterers, they'd slept with hookers, they'd been con men, they'd conned clients out of money. Shively, the mechanic, the kind of the most outwardly evil of them, is a Vietnam veteran and was charged with murder over the My Lai massacre, and actually beat the charges because the witnesses were dead, and he becomes violent, and they turn on each other because Malone, the dreamer, Adam Malone, the writer and the schemer, is the only one with any sense of conscience who begins to feel bad about what they've done. So I don't know if I'm selling it to you so far because I've been talking all about the controversy, and you might be thinking, why would I want to read a book about these guys? Well, the good news is, if that's what you're thinking, I might just be able to win you over now, because the second half is increasingly from Sharon's perspective. And at first she's helpless, and she's abused, and it's very difficult to read. But when she begins to get her dignity back, her bearings back, she begins to scheme her way out of there, and she begins to plot her revenge. And then it does become like a rape and revenge story, because she's very clever how she does it. She starts to make them think that she likes them. She always says to each and every one of them, "Oh, you're the best, and you're wonderful. You're the only one I love." And she starts to pit them against each other, and she starts to figure out where she is and how to get news back to her entourage or the people who love her in Hollywood and her friends and family. And it's very satisfying then. And you want to see these guys get taken down hard for what they've done, because what they've done is so revolting and vile that we do get the satisfaction of seeing them get their comeuppance. And, it is delicious. And then right at the end, once you've been satisfied that good has triumphed over evil without giving too much away, there is one out there final twist which just kind of floors you. And I'm going to say that as twists go, it doesn't make that much sense in terms of character motivations. I think the two characters who are involved in that twist, you think to yourself, no, they wouldn't do that, or no human being would do that. But it makes an impact, and that's probably the most important thing, because it leaves you reeling and you'll be thinking about it weeks afterwards. So all in all, I'd say 50 years after publication, the fan club is worth a read. It was a big influence on James Elroy, and an influence that he has returned to, because he spent his youth reading Wallace and Harold Robbins and these sorts of melodramas, and he has tried with his latest novel, The Enchanters, to um, to bring some of that ethos, to bring some of that kind of stylistic quality back into the modern novel, and with a degree of success, I would say. And it's interesting to think back and read this and think to say, Wallace was a cultural phenomenon in America and elsewhere, and it's interesting to read this and think, oh, despite the controversies, despite the fact that it's politically problematic and sexually problematic, and there's some attitudes here that are just revolting. Um, it's still a compelling story. It's still a gripping story, and it's still ultimately a satisfying story. Be, because good triumphs over evil, and it's nice to see these guys, suffer. So I would say get yourself, it's out of print now, was once a bestseller, now out of print. Get yourself a copy of Irving Wallace's The Fan Club if you'd like to read it. I would say it's probably worth a read, and I would say that Love Me, Fierce and Danger is definitely worth a read. Wish me luck for the Edgars. Okay, that's the end of my first podcast. I'll see you soon for the next one. Goodbye.